The first time I noticed it, I told myself I was being paranoid. We live in a quiet subdivision outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where every house looks like a slightly rearranged version of the next. Two-car garages, American flags on porches, lawns trimmed within half an inch of HOA compliance. We'd been in that house for 5 years, long enough to know which neighbor ordered too many Amazon packages and which one drank too much on football Sundays. Our next-door neighbor, Ryan, moved in about 8 months ago. Early 40s, divorced, worked remote in tech, drove a black Tesla that barely made a sound when it pulled into his driveway. Friendly enough, the kind of guy who grills shirtless in the summer and pretends not to notice who's watching. My wife, Melissa, was the first to welcome him. I remember that afternoon clearly. She'd baked banana bread, said it was just being neighborly. I didn't think anything of it. That's who she'd always been, friendly, outgoing, warmer than me. But about 3 weeks after he moved in, Melissa started going on evening walks. At first, it sounded healthy. She said she needed to clear her head after work. She works at a marketing firm downtown, hybrid schedule, long days staring at screens. I didn't question it, I actually encouraged it, told her I was proud of her for prioritizing herself. Then I noticed the pattern. She'd leave around 9:30 p.m., always after I'd settled on the couch, always after we'd already eaten dinner, always after she checked her phone twice and gotten oddly quiet. And she'd come back exactly an hour later. Not sweaty, not flushed from exercise, just different, calmer, almost too calm. One night I walked to the front window after she left. I don't know why, instinct I guess. I watched her walk down the sidewalk. She didn't turn left toward the main road like she used to when she first started walking. She turned right, toward Ryan's house. She didn't knock, she just walked straight up to his front door like she'd done it 100 times. The porch light flicked on before she even reached it, and then she disappeared inside. I stood there frozen, staring at the empty sidewalk. My brain tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe she needed help with something. Maybe she was helping him with something. Maybe she'd mentioned it and I just forgot. Except she hadn't. When she came home that night, I asked casually, "How was your walk?" She smiled. That same warm smile I'd known since we were 26. It was good, quiet, needed it. I wanted to say, "I saw you go next door." But I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it real. Instead, I nodded and kissed her forehead. That became our routine. Every night at 9:30, she'd grab a light jacket, even when it wasn't cold, and head out. And every night she'd turn right. And every night she'd come home an hour later. At first, I watched from the window like some kind of psycho. Then I started pretending to be asleep when she got back. I'd listen to her move around the bedroom, the bathroom sink running, the soft click of her phone charger plugging in. One night I smelled cologne. Not mine. I didn't confront her. I just laid there staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. We'd been married 12 years. No kids. We talked about it, but timing was always off. Careers, money, life. It was always something. And if I'm being honest, the last year had felt off. We weren't fighting, we weren't cold, but we weren't electric either. We'd slipped into routine. Netflix, work, groceries, repeat. Still, I never thought she'd step outside our marriage. Not like this. I started watching Ryan more carefully. I'd time his lights, his comings and goings. Sometimes I'd step outside when I knew she was over there, pretending to take out the trash just to see if his living room light was on. It always was. One Saturday afternoon, I struck up a conversation with him while he was washing his car. "Settling in okay?" I asked. "Yeah, man, neighborhood's great," he said, spraying down the hood. "Good people." He looked me straight in the eye when he said it. I searched his face for guilt, for something. But he just smiled like we were two normal neighbors discussing lawn care. That night, Melissa left at 9:30 like clockwork. I didn't watch from the window. Instead, I grabbed my keys and got in my truck. I drove around the block slowly and parked where I could see his driveway without being obvious. Her car was still in our garage. His Tesla was in his driveway. And his bedroom light was on. I sat there for 45 minutes, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I imagined them on his couch. I imagined them laughing. I imagined him touching her waist. My mind kept replaying every little thing she'd done differently over the past few months. Buying new lingerie, changing her hair, suddenly caring more about her workouts, guarding her phone like it held state secrets. When she came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table. She froze when she saw me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, just couldn't sleep.
She walked over and kissed my cheek. Her lips lingered for half a second too long, like she was checking if I suspected something. That's when the idea started forming. I didn't want to confront her without proof. I didn't want her twisting it into paranoia or insecurity. I needed something undeniable. The next week, while she was at work, I drove to a hardware store across town. I told the clerk I needed a small recording device for security reasons. He didn't ask questions, just showed me a few options. I bought one small enough to hide in a smoke detector casing. My hands shook the entire drive home. I told myself I wasn't crazy, that I deserved the truth, that if nothing was happening, I'd feel stupid but relieved. That night at 9:15, while she was in the shower, I stepped outside. Ryan's side yard had a narrow fence with a loose panel I'd noticed months ago. I slipped through like I was breaking into a stranger's property, which I guess I was. His front porch light was off. No one home yet. I moved fast. I mounted the device above his porch in a corner near the entry, angled slightly toward the doorway and living room window. Not perfect, but enough. I got back into our house just as Melissa walked downstairs. "You coming to bed soon?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. 9:30. She grabbed her jacket. "I'm gonna take a walk." "Of course you are," I thought. I waited until she left before pulling up the app connected to the device. The live feed flickered to life. Grainy, slightly tilted, but clear enough. I watched her walk up to his door. This time I saw it clearly. He opened it before she knocked. She didn't hesitate. She stepped inside. And then he reached for her. Not a friendly hug. Not namely. His hand went straight to her waist, pulling her into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And she kissed him. Not quick, not unsure. It was deep, familiar, practiced. I felt something inside my chest tear open. But I kept watching, because I needed to know how far this went. The door closed, and the porch light shut off. The camera kept streaming empty darkness. I sat there in my own living room, staring at my phone screen, while my wife was next door in another man's arms. And for the first time in 12 years of marriage, I didn't recognize my own life.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the lights off, phone in my hand, replaying the clip over and over, like I was trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Every time Ryan's hand slid around her waist, every time she leaned into him without hesitation, it felt like someone pressing a bruise just to see how much it hurt. Around 10:42 p.m., the porch light flicked back on. My heart jumped into my throat. The door opened. And there she was. Melissa stepped out first, smoothing down her hair, adjusting her jacket like she'd just come from a late movie instead of another man's house. Ryan followed her to the door. He didn't step outside, but he leaned against the frame, close enough that their faces were inches apart. She laughed at something he said. That laugh. I hadn't heard that version of her laugh in a long time. It was lighter, younger, the one she used to have when we were dating, and everything felt new. Then he leaned forward and kissed her again, slower this time. His hand cupped her cheek like he owned her. She kissed him back. No hesitation, no guilt visible from the angle I had. When she finally pulled away, she whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded. She touched his chest before turning and walking back toward our house. Toward me. I dropped the phone onto the couch like it had burned me and rushed upstairs, pretending I'd been in bed the whole time. I lay there stiff as a board when she came in. I listened to her footsteps. The bathroom sink. The closet door sliding open. The faint rustle of her clothes hitting the hamper. She slipped into bed beside me. Her skin felt warm. Warmer than usual. She pressed her body against my back and wrapped her arm around my waist. "Night," she murmured softly. For a split second, I almost turned around and confronted her right then. I wanted to shake her and scream, "How long? How long has this been happening right next to our bedroom wall?" But I didn't, because anger is loud, and I wasn't loud yet. I was cold. The next morning, she made pancakes, like nothing had changed, like she hadn't been moaning in another man's house less than 12 hours earlier. I watched her from across the kitchen island, studying every detail. The way she flipped the pancake with that small wrist flick, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the faint pink flush still lingering on her cheeks. She caught me staring. "What?" She smiled. "Nothing," I said. "You're just glowing." She laughed. "Shut up." Glowing. Yeah, that was one word for it. Over the next week, I collected more footage. I didn't even know who I was anymore.
I'd come home from work and immediately checked the camera angle. I adjusted it once while he was gone to get a better view through the side window. I memorized their routine. She'd arrive at 9:30. He'd pull her inside instantly. Lights dimmed around 9:35. Around 9:40, they'd move out of view of the window, deeper into the house. At 10:40 to 10:45, she'd reappear. Like clockwork. This wasn't spontaneous. This was established. One Thursday night, though, something changed. She left at 9:30 as usual. I pulled up the live feed. Ryan opened the door, but this time they didn't stop at the entryway. They stumbled. He was kissing her neck before the door end shut. She was laughing, breathless, pulling at his shirt. They didn't bother turning off the porch light right away. And for a brief, brutal few seconds, I saw more than I ever wanted to. His hands were under her jacket. Her head tilted back in a way I recognized. A way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Then the door shut hard. I couldn't breathe. I threw my phone across the couch and stood up, pacing the living room like a trapped animal. I wasn't stupid. I knew they were sleeping together. I didn't need a camera to confirm that. But seeing it, even partially, made it different. Made it physical. Real. I started thinking about every time she'd said she was tired. Every time she'd turned me down and that because she had an early meeting. Meanwhile, she had energy for him. At 10:50, she still hadn't come out. 10 minutes later than usual. Then 15. I stared at the screen. At 11:07, the porch light finally came on. The door opened. She stepped out barefoot. Barefoot, holding her heels in one hand. Ryan stepped outside this time. He pulled her into him again, kissing her slower, deeper, like they weren't worried about being seen anymore. His hands slid down her back. She whispered something that made him grin. Then she walked across the lawn instead of the sidewalk, cutting through the darkness like she couldn't wait to get home and pretend none of it happened. I didn't go upstairs that night. I stayed on the couch. When she came in through the front door instead of the garage, I felt something inside me snap. She froze when she saw me sitting there in the dark. "Jesus, you scared me," she said, pressing a hand to her chest. "You didn't take your walk tonight?" I asked calmly. "I did," she replied instantly. Barefoot. She glanced down at the heels in her hand and laughed nervously. My feet were killing me. I stared at her, right at her mouth. Swollen. She shifted her weight, uncomfortable. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how I could destroy both of you right now." But I didn't say that. Instead, I said, "About how much I love you." Her expression softened, and for a second, just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. She walked over and kissed me gently. Soft. Careful. Not like the way she kissed him. And that difference carved into me deeper than anything else. After she went upstairs, I pulled up the recordings again. I watched the way she moved with him. Comfortable. Confident. Like she'd been waiting for this version of herself. I started wondering if this was my fault. Had I gotten complacent? Predictable? Boring? Or had she already been drifting long before Ryan ever moving in? The worst part wasn't the sex. It was how easy it seemed for her. No struggle. No visible internal battle. Just choice. By the following Monday, I had 5 separate nights recorded. Enough to show a lawyer. Enough to humiliate her if I wanted to. But I didn't want to explode yet. I wanted to understand. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her during the day. She had a late client meeting that Wednesday evening downtown. I left work early and parked across the street from her office building. At 5:42 p.m. she walked out. Ryan was already waiting in his Tesla. She didn't look surprised to see him. She got in. They drove off together. And that's when I realized something even worse. This wasn't just a neighbor fling. This wasn't convenience. This was planned. Structured. Integrated into her life. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding so loud I thought I might pass out. They pulled into the parking garage of a hotel near the river. The kind of place people use for conferences during the week and discreet affairs at night. They disappeared inside together. And I sat there in my truck, staring at the entrance. My wife wasn't just sneaking next door for some adrenaline rush. She was building something with him. And I was the only one who didn't know my marriage had already ended. I stayed in that parking garage for almost an hour before I could force myself to move. The rational part of me said, "Go home."
You already know enough. The angry part of me wanted to storm into that hotel lobby and drag her out in front of whoever happened to be standing there. But the cold part of me, the one that had been growing quietly over the past week, won. I parked across the street, where I could see the hotel entrance clearly. It was one of those newer boutique places downtown. Brick exterior, big glass doors, warm lighting in the lobby meant to look inviting. I watched couples walk in and out, business travelers, a group of women laughing loudly in heels. And then I imagined Melissa in there, with him. At 7:18 p.m., they walked out together. She was smiling, not nervous, not rushed, just content. Ryan's hand was on the small of her back like it belonged there. They didn't look like two people hiding something. They looked like a couple, like they'd done this 100 times. She leaned into him as they walked to the Tesla. He opened the passenger door for her. She touched his arm before getting in, like some silent thank you for whatever they'd just shared upstairs. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my palms started sweating. 12 years. 12 years of birthdays, holidays, inside jokes, shared bank accounts, late-night talks about the future, and here she was, stepping into another man's car like I was just some temporary placeholder in her life. I followed them back toward our neighborhood, keeping enough distance so they wouldn't notice. He dropped her off 2 blocks away from our house. That detail hit me harder than anything else. She didn't want anyone seeing his car near ours during the day. She was thinking ahead. She walked the rest of the way home alone, head down, phone in hand. When she walked through our front door at 7:42, I was already sitting at the dining table with my laptop open, pretending to work. "Hey," she said, breezy. "Meeting ran long. I'm starving." "Productive?" I asked without looking up. "Yeah," she replied instantly. "Actually, really good. Client loved the pitch." She walked into the kitchen and started pulling things out of the fridge like she hadn't just spent 2 hours in a hotel with our neighbor. I watched her from the reflection in the microwave door. She hummed softly to herself. That humming used to be for me. That night she didn't go on her walk. Instead, she curled up next to me on the couch and rested her head on my chest while we watched some crime show neither of us were really paying attention to. Her fingers traced slow circles on my arm. I felt like I was sitting next to a stranger wearing my wife's face. Around 10 p.m., her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly and tilted the screen away from me. "Work?" I asked casually. "Yeah," she said. "Just emails." She typed a quick response. I didn't need to see the screen to know who it was. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I picked up her phone. I knew her passcode. We'd never hidden that from each other. Until recently. She'd changed it. My chest tightened. That was new. I put the phone back down carefully, like it might explode if I held it too long. By Friday, I wasn't eating much. I wasn't sleeping. My coworkers noticed. "You good, man?" my friend Josh asked during lunch. "You look like hell." "Just tired," I said. I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. This was still contained. That night at 9:30, she grabbed her jacket again. "I might stay a little longer tonight," she said casually. "I need the fresh air." "A little longer?" I nodded. "Sure." The second she stepped outside, I pulled up the live feed. She walked straight to Ryan's door. No hesitation. He opened it almost immediately, like he'd been standing there waiting. This time they didn't kiss at the entrance. They stood there talking. Her face looked serious. His hand kept reaching for hers, but she pulled away slightly. My heart started pounding. What was this? She stepped inside. The door closed. The porch light stayed on longer than usual. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The living room light flickered off. At 10:58 p.m., nearly an hour and a half later, the porch light came back on. They stepped outside together, and that's when I saw it. She was crying. Not hysterical, but visibly upset. Her eyes red, her mouth tight. Ryan looked frustrated. He was talking quickly, hands moving as he spoke. She shook her head. He grabbed her arm gently, trying to stop her from walking away. She pulled free. She said something I couldn't hear, and then she walked back toward our house alone. He stood there for a long time watching her go before finally shutting the door. I didn't move from the couch. When she came in, she looked surprised to see me awake. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She wiped under her eyes quickly. "Yeah, just allergies." "At night?" I asked. She forced a smile. "You're interrogating me now?" "I'm just asking." She stared at me for a few seconds too long, and in that silence, something shifted. Not guilt this time. Fear. She went upstairs without another word. I stayed downstairs replaying what I had just seen. They were fighting. That meant this wasn't just physical. It meant emotions were involved, and that scared me more than the sex ever did. The next morning, she was distant, quiet. Her phone buzzed twice during breakfast. She ignored it both times. "Everything okay?" I asked, but she didn't meet my eyes. That afternoon, I did something reckless. I walked next door. Ryan's Tesla was in the driveway. He was home. I knocked. He opened the door, looking mildly surprised. "Hey," he said. "What's up?" I forced a smile. "Just wanted to ask if you'd seen Melissa's package. Amazon said it was delivered here by mistake." He hesitated for half a second. "Nope," he said. "Haven't seen anything."
I studied his face, the faint stubble on his jaw, the confidence in his posture. "You sure?" I asked, stepping slightly closer. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Why?" I held his gaze. No reason. For a split second, I thought about punching him, just to see his expression change. But instead, I nodded and walked back to my house. That night, Melissa didn't leave at 9:30. She stayed home. But around 10:15, her phone rang. She glanced at it quickly and tilted the screen away from me. I followed quietly and stood just inside the sliding door. "I told you I can't just," she whispered harshly into the phone. "You're not listening." Pause. "No, I'm not leaving him. Not like this." My stomach dropped. "Leaving me." The word echoed in my head. "I care about you," she continued softly, "but you knew what this was." Another pause. "I have a life here." She turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of her face. Torn, conflicted, but not regretful. When she came back inside, she saw me standing there. For a second, we just stared at each other. "How much did you hear?" she asked quietly. "Enough," I replied. The air between us felt electric, dangerous. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, and in that hesitation, I knew everything. She didn't answer me right away. That silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. "You know who," she finally said. Her voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't apologetic either. It was steady, like she was done pretending. I nodded slowly. "Ryan." She closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "Yes."
There it was. No more lies about walks, no more fake client meetings. Just the truth, sitting naked in our kitchen under the dim patio light. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "Since October." October. 8 months. Almost the exact amount of time he'd lived next door. I let out a short breath that almost turned into a laugh. "So basically since he moved in." "It wasn't planned," she said quickly. "It just happened." I stared at her. You don't just accidentally end up in a hotel with the guy next door. Her face flushed. "You followed me?" "I didn't need to," I said quietly. "I saw everything." Her expression changed. Confusion, then fear. "What do you mean you saw everything?" I held her gaze. "Every night you walked next door. Every kiss on the porch. The hotel. Tonight." Her lips parted slightly. "You spied on me?" I didn't flinch. I installed a camera on his porch. For a split second, she looked genuinely stunned. Then anger flashed across her face. "That's insane," she said. "That's illegal." "So is adultery," I shot back. We stood there, breathing hard, neither of us backing down. "You invaded my privacy," she said. "You invited another man into our marriage," I replied. Her shoulders slumped. The anger drained out of her almost as quickly as it came. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "But it did," I said. "You didn't stop it." She sank into one of the kitchen chairs like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. I stayed standing. "It started as just talking," she said. "You were working late all the time. We barely touched each other anymore. He was there. He listened." I felt that one, because it wasn't entirely wrong. Work had gotten heavier the past year. I'd been distracted, tired, sometimes distant. But I never stepped outside our house looking for comfort. "So that makes it okay?" I asked. "No," she said immediately. "It doesn't." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "I felt invisible," she continued, "like we were roommates. He made me feel wanted again." "And I didn't?" I asked, my voice breaking despite myself. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "You used to," she said softly, "but somewhere along the way we stopped trying." The thing is, I could argue with her about timelines, about responsibility, about betrayal, but I couldn't argue with the feeling that something between us had been fading long before Ryan showed up. That didn't excuse what she did, but it explained how it was possible. "Are you in love with him?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation hit harder than anything else she'd said. "I care about him," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." She swallowed. "I don't know." I nodded slowly. "Did you plan to leave me?" She shook her head quickly. "No." I told him tonight. "I'm not leaving like this." "Like what?" "Like some cliché affair that blows up everything. I wasn't going to walk out on you without at least trying to fix us." I almost laughed at that. "You call this trying?" She flinched. "I was scared," she admitted.
scared that if I told you how unhappy I was, you'd either shut down or get angry. And then he was just there. I walked to the counter and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. You know what the worst part is? I said quietly. She looked up at me. You didn't even have to leave the neighborhood. That made her cry. Actually cry this time. It wasn't about convenience, she said through tears. It was about feeling alive. And I make you feel dead? She shook her head desperately. No. You make me feel safe. That word. Safe. I'd spent 12 years trying to be that for her. Stable. Reliable. Loyal. Apparently that wasn't enough. So what now? I asked. She wiped her face. I ended it tonight. I stared at her. You what? I told him I can't keep doing this. That I have to figure out my marriage. Because you wanted to? I asked. Or because he pushed? Her silence answered me. He wants you to leave, I said flatly. She nodded slowly. And you're considering it? I was, she whispered. The honesty of that almost knocked the air out of me. Are you still? I asked. She stood up and walked toward me carefully, like I might shatter. I don't know, she said. I'm standing here because I don't want to lose you. But I can't pretend nothing's broken. I looked at this woman I'd loved for over a decade. The woman I'd bought a ring for. The woman I'd stood across from in front of our families and promised forever. And I realized something painful. We'd both been sleepwalking. She just woke up in someone else's arms. I recorded everything, I said quietly. Her face went pale. Everything? Enough. She closed her eyes. Are you going to use it? The fact that she asked that told me she knew exactly how ugly this could get. Divorce court. Friends. Family. Public humiliation. I could ruin her. I could ruin him. I had the proof. I walked past her into the living room and picked up my phone from the coffee table. I opened the app and pulled up one of the videos. The porch light. The kiss. His hand on her waist. I held it out to her. She watched for maybe 5 seconds before turning away. Stop, she whispered. This is what I've been seeing every night, I said, while you crawl into bed next to me. She covered her mouth, shaking. I could feel the anger rising again, hot and sharp. But underneath it was something else. Grief. Not just for the affair, for the version of us that didn't exist anymore. I lowered the phone. I don't know if I can get past this. I said honestly. I don't know if I deserve for you to, she replied. We stood there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on both of us. Finally, I asked the question I'd been avoiding since the first night I watched her walk next door. If I hadn't installed that camera, would you have ever told me? She didn't hesitate this time. No. That answer was the final crack. Not the sex. Not the hotel. The lie that would have lasted forever if I hadn't forced it into the light. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. She looked at me, panic rising in her eyes. Okay, what? Okay. I need space. She reached for my arm. Please don't leave. I'm not leaving, I said. But I'm not staying in this room tonight. I walked upstairs and packed a small bag. Just a few clothes. My laptop. The charger. When I came back down, she was standing in the hallway. Eyes red. Shoulders shaking. Where are you going? Josh's, I said. Just for a couple days. She nodded, like she'd expected that. As I opened the front door, I glanced next door. Ryan's house was dark. For the first time in months, it felt like an ordinary house again. I stepped outside into the cool Ohio night. The same street we'd walked together so many times. The same sidewalk she'd used to cross into someone else's arms. And I realized something. I didn't just lose my wife. I lost the version of myself who believed she would never do this. I got in my truck and started the engine. As I pulled away, I didn't look back at the house, because I didn't know if I was driving away temporarily or for good.